The Mind Loan videos is a series of educational videos on selected topics of practical importance. Today I'm speaking on cryptocurrency regulation in Nigeria. If you follow the news, you would recall that on the 5th of February 2021, the Central Bank of Nigeria issued a circular prohibiting financial institutions from facilitating transactions in cryptocurrencies. Earlier in 2020, the Securities and Exchange Commission also made an attempt to bring cryptocurrencies within its regulatory jurisdiction by releasing the Statement on Digital Assets and their classification and treatment. Both the CBN and the Securities and Exchange Commission gave reasons for the circular and the statement. According to the Central Bank of Nigeria, cryptocurrencies aid money laundering, terrorism, arms dealing, and other crimes. Cryptocurrencies are also unregulated and are not legal tender. As for the Securities and Exchange Commission, it justified the Statement on Digital Assets by saying it is necessary to ensure investor protection, promote ethical practices, and maintain the integrity and transparency of the capital market. Now, let's look at some of the key provisions of the SEC Statement on Digital Assets. The statement defines a digital asset as a digital representation of value that can be digitally traded and functions as a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value, or either of these, but does not have legal tender status in any jurisdiction. Digital assets are to be regarded as securities by default, unless the contrary is proven. The statement classifies digital assets into four categories: crypto assets, utility tokens, security tokens, and derivatives/collective investment schemes. Crypto assets will be treated as commodities as provided for in Part E of the SEC Rules 2013, and if traded under a recognized securities exchange. Utility tokens will be likewise treated, except those traded over the counter, which would only be treated as commodities if they are traded under a recognized security exchange. Derivatives and collective investment schemes will be treated as specified investments as provided for under the Investments and Securities Act. As regards blockchains, all blockchain-based digital asset offerings made in or targeted at Nigeria will be regulated by SEC unless where a foreign jurisdiction has a reciprocity agreement with Nigeria or the foreign issuer is a member of the International Organization of Investment and Securities Commissions. All entities offering digital assets registered based on a blockchain model must also be registered with and regulated by SEC. As we already mentioned, the CBN circular was preceded by the SEC statement on digital assets, and there is an interplay between the SEC statement and the CBN circular. So let's look at this. The SEC statement was generally well received when it was released. It was seen by observers as bringing some regulatory assurance to the crypto sector. CBN's subsequent circular prohibiting banks and other financial institutions from facilitating cryptocurrency transactions has cast a shadow of doubt over their regulatory future. This is simple to understand. If you cannot facilitate transactions in securities, then what value are those securities? How can they really be called securities? For example, SEC had designed a regulatory incubation framework for fintech firms covering cryptocurrency firms. However, it has announced that it will proceed with the implementation of the framework without the crypto firms affected by the CBN circular. Now, there are certain important questions to ask in light of the CBN circular and the SEC statement. The first one is, do cryptocurrencies truly encourage crime? Are cryptocurrencies legal tender? Are cryptocurrencies regulated? Are cryptocurrencies true money? Are cryptocurrencies really currencies? And are cryptocurrencies securities? Now let's look at the first question. Do cryptocurrencies encourage crime? Cryptocurrencies make it easier for criminals to perpetrate acts like money laundering, cyber crimes of different kinds, and terrorist financing. The major reasons why cryptocurrencies facilitate crime is the anonymity and low traceability of crypto transactions. In addition to this, operators of crypto exchanges may also pull off exit scams. An exit scam is when a crypto exchange basically shuts down and makes way with the money in the system. Now, on to the second question. Are cryptocurrencies legal tender? For us to be able to answer this question properly, we need to understand what legal tender means. Legal tender is anything recognized by law as a means to settle a public or private debt or meet a financial obligation, including tax payments, contracts, and legal fines or damages. Legal tender functions as a medium of indirect exchange, unit of account, store of value, and a standard of deferred payment. Usually, legal tenders are designated so by statute. The institution that creates and issues legal tender is also usually empowered to do so by statute. In Nigeria, Section 2B of the Central Bank of Nigeria Act vests the power to issue legal tender solely on the Central Bank of Nigeria. Now, are cryptocurrencies legal tender? Currently, very few countries recognize any cryptocurrency as legal tender. An example of a country that has designated a cryptocurrency as legal tender is Venezuela. Venezuela created its own cryptocurrency, the petro, as a response to inflation. The petro was supposed to be backed, was designed so to be backed by Venezuela's petroleum reserves. Even where a cryptocurrency is accepted as a medium for transacting, as is common with Bitcoin, it still does not confer the status of legal tender on such cryptocurrency. Now, are cryptocurrencies regulated? Cryptocurrencies are generally not regulated by governments. However, some cryptocurrencies are managed by centralized entities, but others have a decentralized structure with no central managing entity. On to the next question. Are cryptocurrencies true money? Cryptocurrencies are not true money because they do not have any intrinsic value. Simple. Are cryptocurrencies assets? Since crypto assets do not have any intrinsic value and cannot be equated to true money, their use as a means of exchange make them practical currencies. Are cryptocurrencies securities? Section 315 of the Nigerian Investments and Securities Act defines securities as debentures, stocks, or bonds issued or proposed to be issued by a government. Debentures, stocks, shares, bonds, or notes issued or proposed to be issued by a body corporate. Any right or option in respect of any such debentures, stocks, shares, bonds, or notes, or commodities, futures, contracts, options, and other derivatives. And the term securities in this act includes those securities already mentioned, which may be transferred by means of any electronic mode approved by the Commission and which may be deposited, kept, or stored with any licensed depository or custodian company as provided under this act. Considering the definition of securities under the Investments and Securities Act, it is right to say that cryptocurrencies can be accommodated by that definition. This is more so when the concept of securities is understood as a tool for interpreting the relevant sections of the Investments and Securities Act. When this is done, it will be seen that despite the fact that cryptos may not be described by the issuers using any of the exact words in the Investment and Securities Act, they nonetheless bear certain conceptual characteristics that make them qualify as securities. In the course of our discussion, we've been mentioning certain terms like money, currency, security, and legal tender. Now, it is necessary to understand these terms and know the distinction between them. Money is basically value embodied in a product or service. The monetary nature of assets comes from their exchangeability for other assets with intrinsic value. And as a matter of fact, this was the practice in the era of bartering. As a result of the impracticability of bartering, societies settled on specific commodities as a means of exchange. These commodities also had their own intrinsic value against which whatever assets that are to be traded are measured. The use of specific exchange commodities also became impracticable and was replaced with paper notes which functioned like IOUs. These paper monies were currencies and were backed by real commodities such as gold. This means that for every paper currency printed, there was an equivalent amount of a particular exchange commodity which the recipient of the note was entitled to. With the coming into being of central banks, the IOU element of paper currencies was eliminated, and the recipients of paper currencies were no longer personally entitled to exchange commodities, but such exchange commodities were kept in a central bank reserve as a collective backing to the amount of paper currency in circulation. The gold standard was essentially a system of currencies backed by actual gold reserves. The gold standard was abused during the First and Second World Wars as countries printed more currency than the gold they had in reserve. Towards the end of the Second World War, at the Conference of Allied Nations held at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, it was agreed that the United States dollar would be used as benchmark currency by other countries, while the United States dollar itself would be backed by gold. Gold standard was, however, terminated in 1971 by the United States President Richard Nixon. Since the termination of the gold standard, countries began to operate what are called fiat currencies. Fiat currencies are not backed by any exchange commodity, but their values are fixed by sovereign powers as influenced by surrounding circumstances. Fiat currencies are always designated as legal tender. Now let's throw some light on what a security means. A security is simply a legal instrument entitling the holder to an underlying asset, tangible or intangible. An example is a share which entitles a shareholder to receive dividends. A security may have or may not have intrinsic value. For example, shares is held in a company that trades in a physical commodity or a service are definitely backed by some intrinsic value captured in the physical commodity or service. However, in the modern economy, digital assets are created by fiat, and even though these digital holdings are regarded as assets, they do not have any value apart from that conferred on them by the issuers and users. Fiat currencies, which can only be issued by central banks, are legal tender. Actual money, that is commodities and services, though not legal tender, are acceptable as money because they have intrinsic value. and nothing prohibits the exchange of raw unmediated value even today. A problem arises where an asset is neither legal tender nor backed by anything of intrinsic value, but is itself created by fiat. The use of fiat assets, in quote, as money is questionable where they have not been accepted as legal tender because they do not have any intrinsic value and their market value may fall to zero or they may be cancelled by the issuer altogether. So where do cryptos fall? The use of fiat assets as money effectively creates parallel fiat currencies. Cryptocurrencies are created by fiat and fall into the category I refer to as fiat assets. Since they do not have any intrinsic value, and whatever value they have at any given point in time is a combination of the issuer's fiat and subsequent market behavior, whatever value they may have may be described as a bubble. So, what is the final analysis? Where an asset is not legal tender, for it to be used as money, it historically had an intrinsic value. Where an asset is not legal tender but has intrinsic value, it may be used as money regardless. So, cryptocurrencies are not legal tender. However, they are used as a matter of fact as payment in transactions. Current theoretical and statutory frameworks justify prohibiting the use of cryptocurrencies as money. However, practice sometimes precedes law. In the case of cryptocurrencies and their legal tender status may be such a case. So, a new convention may be crystallizing, a convention which may eventually become law. So whether cryptocurrencies will eventually be regarded as legal tender is something that time will reveal. Thank you for listening. See you next time. Thank you.